Now there's three passages that at first don't seem to be connected. The wedding feast, the greatest commandment, and Christ on the cross saying, "It is finished." First, I'd like to focus on the greatest commandment. An expert of the law questioned Jesus, "What is the greatest commandment?" Now, the Jews at the time had roughly 613 commandments that had to be obeyed. 365 of these were negative commandments, and 248 were positive commandments. Who can give me one of the negative commandments? Thou shalt not kill. Bear false witness, yes. Thou shalt not have any gods before me. Thou shalt not make any carved image. Thou shalt not take the name of your God in vain. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. In our 10 commandments, there's only 2 positive commandments. Thou shalt remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And thou shalt honour thy father and thy mother. Those combined make up the 10 commandments, which most of us are taught about when, most of the people here are taught about when they're young. These are the 10 most well known of the commandments in the Jewish law. They actually had 603 more, all derived from the Torah and interpretation of the books of Moses. Imagine having commandments that ruled every aspect of your life. When you can eat certain food, how to kill your sacrifices, what you should wear for certain festivals, where you can live during certain times of the year, how to butcher your goat. That's a useful one. How far you can walk on a Sabbath. The distance is actually 2,000 cubits, just over half a mile. My house is 0.7 a mile from this church. I would not be able to get to this church on a Sabbath. What material your clothing is made from. That it's not mixed materials. All of us have been chucked out for that. Because of what we're wearing. I would have found it exhausting. I find it hard enough to keep below 30 in a built-up area. The Sadducees lived by the letter of the law and obeyed every single one of them. The Torah was their guidebook for life, and they followed it religiously. They were very religious people. They would have memorized the Torah from being young kids and regarded it as the law in its entirety, not to be added to or subtracted from. The Pharisees, on the other hand, had a more fluid approach to the Torah. They had the same laws and believed they were open to human interpretation and were more like guidelines. A bit like in the Pirates of the Caribbean, the pirate law. It's more like guidelines. And they thought they should be followed in principle. Who knows what this is? It's the highway code. Every single person here that drives should have read it. This is the brand new version. How many people have read this book? How many people have read a version of this book just before they pass a test? It contains rules about how we should drive, ride, walk on the roads and pavements, whether by foot, on 2, 3, 4, or more wheels. If you're a road user, you're expected to know this book. Because if you fail to keep these rules, you can find yourself with a fine, points on your license, in court, or even in prison. In here, there are 307 rules that must be obeyed. And those don't include over 100 traffic signs. How much is the fine and points for not having washer liquid in your car? 3 points, £100. So if your washer bottle isn't filled up, you can have 3 points on your license. What's the fine for not having 100% coverage on your wheel of your tread? Per wheel. £1,000. If you have a bold rim around the edge, it's £1,000 for each wheel. Must not. There's lots of musts and must nots in here, and they're highlighted in red. But yeah, we're all drivers. Well, a lot of us are drivers. We don't even know the rules. These guys, they had 600 odd rules, and they knew them all. Down to the very last letter, colon, and full stop. Now Jesus had just stopped a member of the Sadducees, these guys that take the Torah word for word. In his tracks, the Pharisees decided they would ask a question, just to prove their version of religion was better. They put their heads together and came up with the best question they could possibly ask to trip Jesus into proving his knowledge was inferior to their beliefs. Knowing all the commandments from the law of Moses and the prophets, and the thousands of new ones they had interpreted, they must have been pretty confident. Must have been pretty confident that Jesus would not know better than they did. So, after deliberating, they came up with, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Now, Jesus had 613 commandments to choose from. Which is the greatest? So Jesus makes up his own. He doesn't use one of theirs. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it actually say that command. That is not in the Torah. Neither in the Old Testament does it say, love thy neighbor as yourself. But the Pharisees didn't notice. Jesus just made it up. 2 new commandments. They just fell silent because, as Jesus put it, on these 2 things the whole law hangs. And they couldn't argue with that. Jesus had taken the whole law of the Jews, all 613 laws, and distilled them down to 2 new commandments that the law keepers, the religious people of the day, couldn't argue with. Jesus knew the law. He was part of the trilogy that passed the law to man. Unfortunately, the men entrusted with upholding the law had taken something simple and complicated it to such a state that they didn't notice when Jesus paraphrased it and made up his own. Now, breaking the rules was a serious business. As we read, just because a guy didn't put on his finest shirt for a wedding, he was hogtied and thrown out of the building into the darkness. This may sound a bit extreme, just because he didn't have his best shirt on. On the cruise that me and Elaine had just taken last month, I was kicked out of a restaurant for exactly that. I was kicked out for not having a long sleeve shirt. I'd just come from watching football, jeans and t-shirt on, as normal. I was refused entry and told to go and change into something more appropriate for the venue. They didn't tie me up and throw me overboard, but they wouldn't allow me access to the table where Elaine was sat waiting for her dinner, with her tummy rumbling. We're not expected to comply with 613 rules that the Jews followed. That was the old law. The law laid down in the Old Testament by Moses and the prophets. Because in John 13 verse 34, Jesus himself said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you." Here, Jesus is giving us the new law, the new way of living, cutting through all the red tape and the man-made conditions that religion puts on our salvation. On the cross, as he's just about to die, Jesus' last words were, "It is finished." What was finished? I believe he means the old law. Jesus fulfilled the old law and gave us a new one in John 13. He was the completion of the law of Moses. So what do we have now? We have 3 rules to follow as Christians. They're even good rules to follow if you're not a Christian. Number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul and mind. Just make sure you choose the right God. There are so many things in this world that can become the God in our life. Our partner, our bikes, drink, music, drugs, football, so many other things. Make sure the God that you love with your whole being is capable of loving you back in equal or greater measure, because the vast majority of things are incapable of love. The God that I follow loved me so much that he sacrificed his son on a cross at Calvary to prove it. Number 2, love your neighbour as yourself. This doesn't put conditions on the other person. They may be different from you in a host of ways: colour, sexual orientation, nationality, brand of bike ridden, or even follow a different football team to you. The command doesn't specify that they have to ride a Triumph, be bald, and bearing with a beard supporting Wigan Athletic. I'll be all right. Because that would narrow the field down a bit. The command is to love anyone and everyone as you love yourself. Number 3, love one another as I have loved you. Jesus loved us so much that he was prepared to die for us. Who are you prepared to die for? Are you even prepared to inconvenience yourself for the benefit of somebody else? Or are there conditions on it? I'm not doing that because they don't do this for me. Christ did not put conditions on his love, and neither should we. The first word all commands start with is love. In Paul's letter to the church in Corinthians, he says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship, lest I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So that's my message for you today. 4 letters, 1 word, L-O-V-E, love. Thank you.